Welcome to Sikhcast, brought to you by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to our series commemorating Bhai Vir Singh and his enchanting story written about Rana Surat Singh. Hosting the series will be myself, Kiranjot Kaur, the Associate Editor here at Sikhi, and Inni Kaur, the Creative Director at Sikhi, as well as the translator of Bhai Vir Singh's work. Rana Surat Singh is the tale of an estranged widow, Rani Raj Kaur, who's pining for her late husband. Within the story, Bhai Vir Singh takes us all on a journey from the temporal realm of spousal longing into the depths of a mystical relationship with the divine. We become Rani Raj Kaur by hearing about her intense desire to meet her king, or her late husband Rana Surat Singh. Her story begins with satsang, a community of inspired beings, and so it makes sense for us to begin the podcast series here as well. Bhai Vir Singh's emphasis on community in this story is perhaps a reflection on the value he places on the larger Sikh community, and perhaps his need to reinvigorate Sikh paradigms with the same love-filled devotion one experiences in the presence of the satsang. We too are building and living in a community with these podcasts. By the end, we as the audience really hope to identify with Rani Raj Kaur and begin to realize our own spiritual journeys in this tale. Bhai Vir Singh's artful prose and elegant ability to weave this mystical story is something that might change us forever, and maybe even ignite a light so bright that we too transform, just as Rani Raj Kaur does. Join our journeys as we explore the intricacies of the Rani's transformation from lover to Gurmukh, or Guru-inspired being, in this podcast series. A series that we hope will detail our own reflective silences and mind-opening realizations as we immerse ourselves into Bhai Vir Singh's world of Sikhi, hope, and resilience. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome back, everyone, to our series. Up until now, we've had the opportunity to get into some very interesting conversations about community, giving, and hope in our previous podcasts. Today's podcast, we will be joined by Inni Ji once again as we get to dive into Naam and the experience of Naam. Now, let me preface by saying that I feel like when we talk about the divine, it always feels kind of abstract. Like the line that really built a bridge for me in Bhai Vir Singh's work was when I read, "When we experience sunlight, we feel like we have attained the sun." And that gave me a bit more insight because for the first time, I realized that we might experience a form of the divine in a similar way. Not directly, but maybe as an offset. So up until now in our previous podcast, we have been discussing satsang, ishnan, and dan. And the final stage in this journey to becoming a Gurmukh is Naam. And I have to be transparent when I say I knew this one would be a doozy because I've always wondered what Naam meant as I was reading Gurbani. I never really came close to an understanding in its entirety. But one thing that really made me pause and really take a breath when I read that remembrance is a form of love. Instantly, that gave some credence to my daily feelings of maybe checking in on my loved ones, shooting my mom or siblings a text, or even stopping in front of my grandfather's picture and taking a moment to remember and thank him for all the love and guidance he gave me. I felt for the first time that was perhaps the most brilliant way I had ever seen love described as remembrance. So we have Inni Ji joining us today, and Inni Ji, I want to know, how can I remember something if I don't think I've ever truly experienced it? So I'm talking about the divine here. And so I guess the question is, what is Naam? And how are we supposed to experience Naam?
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. To you, Kiranjot, and to our listeners. So you've asked the question, what is Naam and how do we experience it? And how can I love something I don't see? Wow. Those are big, big questions. So Naam, what is Naam? Naam is your name, right? So how do we know you? We know you as Kiranjot Kaur. We know you because of your name. So in Bani, it is the name of the divine. Nam is the name of the divine. And how do you feel the name? How do you relate to that Nam? Is when you feel the presence of the divine or the energy. That is how you begin to relate to it. So it's that relationship. It is a form, but it is not the divine. It is anything that connects you to that permanent energy, the Ikunkar, the creator. That connection is Nam. Like you have said, the way Pidaji, Bhai Vir Singh ji has described it is that Nam is a form of the divine, as sunlight is the form of the sun. So when you experience the sunlight, you feel that you have the sun on you, right? It's the same way when you experience the miracle in creation, or when you experience something so beyond your realm, or this feeling, as you were saying one time, that when you were doing Simran of Vaheguru, you have this experience. That is that Nam. Anything that takes you out of yourself to experience the vastness. And Nam, the purpose, or when we feel that Nam continuously or that presence continuously, it is as if we have attained the Nami. Now, the Nami is the giver. So it is that what is Nam. And to your next question, which was, how do you experience it? Well, I'm going to take it from the Sikh lens. In Sikhi, we know that the creator, the Ikunkar, the divine, as it has been revealed to us through Guru Nanak Sahib, that the divine has no form, no shape, no color, and it cannot be seen. So the question which you ask, so how can you connect or even love something which, as you have said, is abstract? It is through remembrance. And let me walk you through it. You mentioned it very slightly in the beginning. But let me ask you, when the one you love is out of your sight, maybe he's gone to a different country, then in what way or in what form would you remember that love within you? It's when you remember the individual. So the deeper the connection, the deeper the remembrance. And eventually, that remembrance, that yad, will become continuous and with every breath, because the connection is so deep. And one would never forget that remembrance, that love within. So this is part of that longing which I was speaking to you about earlier in the podcast when you said, what is this longing? This is that longing, what that remembrance becomes 24/7 within you. And it becomes a part of you. It becomes your every breath. That is why remembrance is one form of love. So when the one you love is near, when the beloved is near, your heart desires that the eyes never leave sight of the beloved for even a moment. But what happens when the beloved moves away from sight? The heart still remembers, never forgetting for a moment. So now the same principle applies. Think about it. We cannot see the divine. We cannot see the creator. But if we keep that creator's remembrance with faith in our heart that the creator, that the divine is there, this remembrance, this is that presence of the creator. Remember how I had said in the previous podcast that the longing then turns from a burning to a sweet longing? This is that stage of that sweet longing when that remembrance becomes sweet and you see that the divinity all around you, that presence, that energy. And it's that remembrance that takes you there. It is not anger that takes you there. It is that sweet, sweet remembrance.
That's very powerful, and I'm starting to grasp it, but I mean, I have to admit it's still, it's very deep, and in the story the way I'm understanding is Nam is the final destination, right? And it's the final stage in becoming a Gurmukh. And I'm not sure how much of it I internalized as I was reading, because it just seems like a very, very deep stage of being, if I'm honest with you. And I want to know, like, how does one even get to that very deep stage? Is there a way to get there? And is it possible for everyone?
Mm. Well, I can only share with you what Bhai Vir Singh ji has written, because nowhere I cannot say that I'm there or that I know the way. But what I do know is through the translations, the way he has described it, the step by step has resonated with me. So in Sikh thought, this continuous flow of remembrance is Simran, is Naam. How does it begin? It begins with an utterance, and this is the way he describes it. And when this utterance, where this name, where this chanting, or where this thought, when it becomes continuous, it becomes a Simran, and that is love. So if this form of love for the Creator, for Vaheguru, for Ikunkar, however you call this entity or feel the presence of this entity, enters the heart easily, then one attains the stage quickly of Nam. But what if, to your question, but what if love doesn't enter the heart quickly and the heart wavers? Then what do we do? Is it so far away from us that we cannot reach it? Is there something that we can do? And this is what Bhai Vir Singh ji says. He said it begins with Nam Jap. We cannot see the Creator, he writes. However, we have given a name to the Creator, multiple names, the names which we associate with the Creator. And these are different names what different people have. And it is actually the devotees, the bhagats, who give the name to the Creator, because in their devotion, there are words that come out. In a mother's love for a child, she says many words for the child that may not be the name of the child, but in love, she calls the child X, Y, and Z, right? Because that love propels her. Similarly, the name of the divine is actually given by the bhagats, the devotees, in their love. When they are in that state, they define or they put a name to it. So whatever that name that you associate the presence with in your body, practice that. And that begins with the tongue. Firstly, through the tongue, when you start reciting that name of that entity which is vast. So when your tongue starts reciting the name and you begin remembering the Creator in your heart, you will gradually and naturally turn inwards. And that chanting, that naam, moves from the tongue to abide in the mind. So it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It is a process. First thing is remembrance. Chant it, and then gradually it becomes a part of you and it gets to abide in the mind. So then he writes, the next stage he writes is when Naam begins to reside in the heart. He calls this Simran. And he describes this stage. What is it? Simran helps one get to that deep stage that, Kiran, you were asking about. So what happens at this stage? Well, at this stage, when unkind thoughts invade the mind, Simran slows them down. And as this pattern, and over time, this pattern gets established. And when Simran gets fully established in the mind, it's called Mandanam. So like we had Ishnan of the body, Ishnan of the mind, Ishnan of the intellect, and Dan the same way. Similarly, it is about the mind too. We begin with the body and then it goes into the mind. And then he writes that as Nam goes deeper, it reaches the place where the subtle mind and your natural, deep seated nature reside. And Nam begins to live there. But he's very careful and he says, but no one knows how this happens. At this stage, he says, your intellect, your mat gets cleansed and the shadows within you disappear. And it is as, and the effect is like, he writes, spreads like one's entire inner being is cleansed and has become clear and beautiful. Now, this intellect cleansing, this mat, rises above the mind. And one of the ways which we can identify, or one can identify the way it happens, this elevation happens, is that one's own self rises. Now, this is not an arrogance. This is a higher stage of awareness. This is probably one of the most elevated spiritual stage, which he describes as Unman, where the Atma, the essence, the spirit experiences great comfort. It's like it's reached its place and it is being illuminated with this experience. And he writes a beautiful sentence. He says, it is the beautiful tree within begins to spread. And when that tree begins to spread and its branches, and there is this experience, what happens? One's consciousness, one's chit becomes calm and illusion free. And one experiences this continuous flow that the Vaheguru, that the divine, that the one is always there. So what happens? Your consciousness becomes calm and illusion free. And you experience a continuous flow of the presence of the creator, the divine, the Vaheguru, the one, whatever you call this entity. And this becomes the reality of your consciousness. No longer it is someone else's experience, or no longer is it that you've read about it. It's actually you feel it. And then when this feeling, this Nam, this connection, this deep connection begins to reside within the Atma, within your spirit, you get connected to the Nami, the giver, the Akal Purak, the divine, however you call it. And that is union, that male that takes place. And it is only through Simran can this connection happen, that this connection with the divine, with this entity take place. Because it really is a connection between that entity, that supreme being, that Paramatma, that essence with the capital E, with your small essence, with the lowercase e, with a lowercase a, with a lowercase spirit. So it's a meeting of the capital S with the lowercase s, the meeting with the capital supreme being with the lowercase self. So as long as there is, breath in the body in every moment, this connection will be continuous. It's like a branch that is connected to a tree. However, he writes very candidly, this is only an example, because that true connection, that true reunion cannot be revealed. And it cannot be relayed because it's an experience. It is like that. But is it that? No one knows. But what he writes is that this connection stays till the end, doesn't break, even when you leave this body. So whatever that Simran, whatever that deep connection, whatever you do in your life, in your journey, it stays with you. It carries forth. It is part of your spirit, your consciousness, which never dies. So it was a bit long, but I wanted to take you on that journey because when we say it in bits and pieces, we never see the entirety of it. That what is the purpose of Nam? Why do we do it? And hopefully this part which I have relayed to you will answer some of those questions.
Thank you, Niji. That is very, very powerful what you've just said, because of course, yes, we read about mystical experiences, but to be able to have that experience for yourself, that is of course the goal. And a lot of the times, even when you're reading about it, or you're trying to understand about divine union, it feels very unfathomable. It feels like we can't reach it. But if you can, take me a little bit further into the journey and break down what exactly is Nam going to do. Like, does it do anything to your physical body? Is it purely, within the consciousness? What is it that it's going to do, and what's the effect of Nam on you?
So I'm going to have to condense exactly what I had shared before. So in a nutshell, if I can say, I think let's put it, Nam does 5 things. I think that's much more easy, it may be easier to understand. Firstly, it cleans the turmoil or the unclean thoughts or the unethical thoughts from the mind and makes it crystal clear. It takes away that noise. Secondly, Nam distances the ego. The ego within us disappears because as the mind gets cleansed, we get closer to realizing that we are not the be end of all. There is something far greater that is working within us. And so that reduces the ego. Nam does that. So thirdly, what it does is that it strengthens the mind. It enables the mind, it enlarges the mind to actually have a deeper concentration. There is a steadiness that comes within the mind. And this allows for the insights to take place. Because so long as the mind is in turmoil and is constantly on the run, there's no time to think. But as the mind has gotten cleansed through Nam, as the ego has dissipated, there is a chance for the insights to emerge. And there is a beautiful thing that what Nam does. The fourth thing is we talk about Amrit. It gives you that sweet taste within yourself. That Amrit, that softness, that sweetness that comes on the tongue. There is a gentleness. It's like a soft, soft drizzle that one feels within. That is what Nam does. And lastly, it connects you to the Nami, to the giver, to the creator. And meeting with the giver, the creator, the divine is actually the purpose of Nam. It begins with the tongue, reciting the name, the remembrance, and where it takes you to the end is meeting that timeless being, that Akal Purakh, that divine, that Ikunkar. This is the Guru's way, the Gurmat way of that connection, of that mail. There are many other ways people have that in different traditions, but in Gurmat, this is the way. So, when you are continuously in that remembrance of Nam, there is this beautiful, there is a devotion that enters you. And that devotion is actually so powerful and so sweet and so loving that you want to continuously be in that stage, because to keep remembrance 24/7 is very hard until you don't become devoted. And it's not that you become devoted, it's actually devotion happens on its own because you're experiencing the sweetness. You are experiencing the insights. So the devotion comes from that, because that is what you want more and more of. So it's not that you no longer are in control in the sense that I will do this. Not really. It happens on its own. But you have to begin. You have to want it. There has to be that desire.
Yeah, I think when you condensed it a little bit, it was a lot easier to follow, and it kind of I feel like you could be talking for hours, and it still is such a deep concept. So thank you for going over that. And just to bring it back to this entire series where we have been going into, what does Ishnan mean? What does Dan mean? Um, and what does satsang mean? Now we're coming to kind of a more complete picture with Nam. And I want to know, because these are all stages, and we spoke about this in the last podcast, that it's not necessarily linear either. But, I wonder, and this might be very silly of me to ask, but, what happens when the individual kind of completes it and attains all these stages? Nam, Dan, Ishnan, they've come into satsang. Do they just cease to exist? Like, what are they doing? Are they floating? Are they like these little, like, you know what I mean? Like, what's happening?
What's happening with the beings? Oh. So it's interesting because the same question was asked, the Rani asked the same question, like what happens to the individual. And in the story, it's revealed when the Gurmukh, this person who has attained, this individual, all three, what happens within them then? So there's a stage where there's a realization that dawns within them, and they recognize the self as the observer. Many times in our lives, maybe we have been in situations where we become the observer. We don't necessarily partake in something, but we are observing it. We are in the drama, but as observers. So think about it that the Gurmukh is now observing, this recognizes the self, that the self is observing everything that is going around them. They're no longer attached to everything what is around them. But this is that stage of the Gurmukh, and I truly believe we use the word Gurmukh way too casually, because a Gurmukh stage enters when the being, where that consciousness, where that self realizes that I am not separate from that supreme being. I am not separate from Ekyonkar. They become aware that everything within me is already done. What we call mind, whether it's my body or the body of the one I love, whether it's wealth or whatever else, our senses, our mind, are all performing or intuitively performing done. So this self, the I, the own self, is unblemished. It's nirmal. It's clean, and it's an inseparable part of that Jyot, the creator. That is why the Gurmukhs yearn, or we yearn to attain Nam. Nam is the third principle practice of a Guru-oriented, of a Gurmukh, and it is the crown of Ishnan and Dan. Nam aids both Ishnan and Dan to reach their destination. Ishnan and Dan cannot happen without Nam. There has to be that yearning that individual wants to experience something far greater. But we also recognize, Kiranjot, that rare individuals get to the stage. However, we get glimpses of these individuals. We get glimpses of certain stages in certain individuals, and we know it's there. So use the word Gurmukh with caution. Who we assign as a Gurmukh is, we need to be careful.
So we can't say that they're these people that are just floating above the clouds and above attachment, right? No, I'm just
No,
kidding.
there's no such thing. As much as you would like to believe, that they have, you know, I know a lot of, there is in Bani that you reach certain stages and the riddhi siddhis, which are these powers that come to you. But the Guru always says, rise above them because that's something far greater. And this is that greatness to connect with the Nami. Don't get tied in with these supernatural powers of you. Oh, I can see, I can predict the future, or if I say something, this will happen, or I can give you a mantra. I have these powers. Don't get tangled in those because there's something far greater that the Guru is saying. Go there. You can experience it. You can be a part of the divine. You are a part of the divine. You are just not experiencing it. So experience it. Go there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea for another podcast, just to delve into the these cities because I that always kind of like gets me going. But you know, it's really interesting because now I feel like I've finally arrived to the table and I'm starting to really understand, because we've spent so many hours just trying to delve into these very, very deep concepts and ideas. But one thing that, this might be kind of like the philosopher in me, but it's interesting, this word, the creator, right? Because in religious conversations, whether it's like lay conversation or in academia, we're always talking about the creator, and like for me, if I bring it down, like when I think of a creator, I think of my mom, right? I think I share that intimacy with her. Of course, I believe in something beyond, right? I believe in a Kalpuk. But again, that's, when I'm talking about intimacy and where I feel like I came from my mother. And so, you talk about remembrance and it becomes a part of you. And I'm not discounting that. But, if maybe I'm intellectualizing this too much, but how am I really supposed to love the creator if I don't know them? Is that just a blessing that happens? And, like, or am I pushing too hard here?
Hmm. I'm smiling at your question. Maybe I'm, uh, because I love the way you say, am I supposed to love the creator if I don't know the creator? Well, the simplistic way, if I had to answer it, you're not supposed to do anything, Kiranjot. You're not supposed to do anything you don't want to do. Because you rightly said you cannot love something or someone you don't know. It's about a relationship. It's all about that. Everything comes down to a relationship. And when you begin to form a relationship with well, what you said, that you believe in Akal Purakh, right? You believe in it, but you haven't formed a relationship as yet. So when that relationship develops, and that depends on you, that is when you are going to feel something. But people feel things in different ways. But the most important thing is to have, for that connection to take place, or whatever it is for some, it is important that they have this connection. For others, no. They don't need to know. They don't need to have a connection. They don't need the creator. They just go through and sail through life. But for some, it's important. And it becomes a matter of faith. They have faith. It becomes an anchor for them, right? And they go through life and it helps them. So, what is in Sikh thought? In Sikh thought, it is Ekunkar is all pervading. The divine is all pervading. In the seen world, in the unseen world, it is always there. And it is invisible to our naked eye. But the light we know is in every being. And that light is the creator. If we can say, the creator, or we can say the light is in every being, and the light is the creator. It is the light. And as this connection with this light, because I want to not use the word creator for a moment, and as this connection with the light gets stronger and firmer, then you begin to remember the light. You lean on the light and you start paying attention to that light. So when you give your attention, your total attention to something, let's take it at the practical level. When you give your attention to something, your total attention to something, your work gets accomplished. But when your attention gets diverted, your work suffers. Similarly, if you focus your attention now, in your case, on Akal Purakh, and others on the light, in the divine, on the creator, on nature, whatever it is, and the qualities and what you feel when you're thinking about Akal Purakh or the creator, you too will feel an energy, because now it's in your mind, it's in your thought, you're thinking about it. And you'll see a shift, see a shift in your consciousness. And gradually you'll begin to witness a few minor changes within you. And you'll realize that there are certain times in the day or certain moments that you reflect more deeply than others. And a relationship is being developed. It may be in the form of a conversation. It could be in the form of art. It could be in a form of chanting. It could be in any form. It could be a form of actually even taking a walk and just appreciating the beauty and developing that relationship. Now, whether you experience that love for the creator, or you feel that love for the creator, or you feel the creator's love or the divine love, that's a different conversation. But it's a journey. So part of me wants to say, why is that we expect a relationship to happen without any investment of ours? We go to school for so many years. We put ourselves through multiple exams to get the degrees because we know it leads to a financial security. We know it leads to success and all that. Are we willing to put ourselves? Are you willing to put yourself through the same rigor to experience the vastness, the divine? Yes, there are no guarantees. But are there guarantees that after your degrees you will attain success, Gurunju? It's that investment. So you want to know someone. And if you want to know someone, you must invest in knowing that person, that entity. And the deeper or the stronger that connection to know that person, believe me, you will want to find everything about that person. I remember when I began reading Professor Puran Singh, I absolutely fell in love with the man. He entered my consciousness. And when he entered my consciousness, I read every book of his. I wanted to know everyone who knew. I even went so far as to find people, his relatives, and speak to them about him because he was in my consciousness. I read what his wife wrote. I mean, literally, you become obsessed and you put in that effort because he did something to me. There was a shift in me when I read his books. Because the change within me was so drastic and I appreciated that change, then I wanted to know about the man who made it possible for me, right? So that's the journey. That's the same thing. It's the same thing with this vastness, this entity, is that you want to feel it. I mean, you've said it yourself. When you're chanting, there is something you experience. What is that? Don't you want to know more about that? Don't you want to put all your effort? That this feeling that I have for a minute or two, why can't it last for 5? Why can't it last for 10? Why can't it last forever? Why can I not be in that space and time when nothing affects me and that I feel this protection? That's what it is.
That's beautiful. And I think as we were going through these series, like it was, it was a point to kind of make sure we covered all our bases. But ultimately where we end is very, very personal. And I think like I loved the way you said anchor. When you use that word anchoring yourself, I felt like immediately I thought, okay, like gratitude practices that you bring into your life every day. Like, how do you, kind of just like sit still and appreciate the beauty around you? There's so many ways of connecting, but sometimes we don't even know we're connecting. Sometimes we, and I'm not saying we need to label anything, but it's always nice to kind of have a path that we know about and that we know that there can be more here as well, right? You just have to start. You have to keep that effort. And I think that's really beautiful because I've always spent my whole life, I've spent reading about mystical experiences, the works like, Rumi, and reading different gurmukhs, that would publish their autobiographies and explain all these crazy like riddhi siddhis that would happen. And I'm like, whoa, magic does exist, right? But then I never really, I never really thought that I could do that too, where I could connect, where I could kind of feel something beyond myself until, those moments, yeah, when I'm doing Simran job or when things just start to kind of slow down and I realize like, whoa, I see my fingers and I'm like, whoa, it feels like I'm looking at my fingers for the first time. What is like, I'm in my body and, I'm here and I'm so grateful to be here and to be having conversations that make me feel like I'm more than just my body. I'm more than just my intellect, but I'm something more. I belong to something way bigger, this vastness that you talk about. So I'm just over the moon right now, and also a little bit sad because Bhai Vir Singh has really held my hand for these 4 podcasts as well as you, Niji, because you never know how much an author or a scholar will affect you until you really dive in. And I never had dived into Bhai Vir Singh's work before this. So it was really just super eye-opening. And I'm super grateful that I had you as a guide. And I'm sure our listeners will say the same. And that, it's really been a journey of wisdom and reflection during the series. And I feel like there's still so much to be said and so much to be learned. And we've gained so much, not only as the people that, we're kind of orchestrating these conversations, but I feel like also as learners and seekers, right? Just like our listeners. So, I'm very, very grateful. And even if this is just the tip of the iceberg of Bhai Vir Singh's work and not only Bhai Vir Singh's work, but just in general, what it means to be a Gurmukh, I'm sure, just as our listeners might be, that I'm really keen to learn more. I'm really keen to, with, God's grace, become a Gurmukh one day. So thank you so much, Aniji, for sharing your knowledge and your personal reflections, because it will definitely stay with me until next time.
It's been a beautiful journey. But in this journey, there is one word which you have used way too many times, and that was magic.
It's the Harry Potter fan in me. I'm sorry.
I want to touch on that. You know what the Guru's magic is? You talked about the Riddhi Siddhis and all, you got enchanted with what the Gurmukhs and all. Well, let me tell you the Guru's magic. If I may, the Guru's magic is that takes ordinary beings like us and makes them extraordinary. That's the magic of the Guru. To take ordinary beings to extraordinary. And that's the journey. That's the magic you want in your life. No other magic.
Brilliant.
Yep. So, my journey with Rana Surat Singh continues. I am working on translating a few more chapters. Intense as they are blissful. Because, they truly absorb me and I get transported into a different realm.
Amazing.
So, but how can what is not seen be described? It's hard to describe that. Only the ones who have seen it. The ones who have seen it also say it cannot be described. It has to be experienced. This is an experience. What I have shared, what I have read, what I have absorbed, it's these are just words. However, that ras, that nectar, is in the experience. And also the desire to experience, that gets heightened. You know, my desire to experience everything that is written has really been heightened. And the path has been laid out. And that's why, for me, I am, constantly working, or this piece is working on me, or Rana Surat Singh is working on me. And it is a gift. It's a gift to me. I feel, yes, it's Bhai Vir Singh's 150th birth anniversary this December. But I feel instead of me giving him a gift, he has given me a gift. And a gift to all the seekers. But that's what, and I would call him a Gurmukh now. I don't use that word. Rarely. I think this is probably the first time I have used that word, because I use it because he has, through his light, touched my mat, my intellect. And that's what a Gurmukh does. Lights one for the other person so they can begin their journey too. So thank you, Kiranjot, for being brave enough to volunteer to do this with me.
Absolutely, anytime. And you know what? I have to say, Niji, like the way that Bhai Vir Singh has kind of held your hand, I think you've held my hand, and maybe my listeners and our listeners today can really, really relate to that, because you have been, that light for me in this journey. So I really want to say thank you to you. And, thank you to all the listeners that have been, listening and going through this journey with us as well. We will be hosting regular podcasts with NEG on different themes. I think I'm going to push for a magic one. So please feel free to send me your thoughts and, any ideas of what's next. So thank you all once again. And my email is kiranjot.kaur@sikhi.org if you have any feedback. And again, once, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Niji. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
You were listening to Sikhcast by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.